good morning, good day, and good evening. Welcome to episode, I don't remember, 173, I'm going to guess, of Tech of a Tea. I'm, as always, your host, Brady Robson, and today we have a guest that doesn't really need much of an introduction, but I'll let you introduce yourself anyway. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Wow. Matthew Miller, the Fedora project leader. I actually go by Matthew, despite having my handle be MattDM everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a story of me being old. When I was in college, our usernames for the VAX were
Mm-hmm.
limited to 8 letters, and the system was first name, middle initial, last name.
Uh-huh.
And so I had the choice of last initial. I had the choice of Matt DM or Mathy DM, and I was like, Mathy DM sounds silly and is too much to
Yeah.
type, so Matt DM it is, and I've got that everywhere. And so if people call me Matt,
Mm.
it's fine. I just might not answer. Just while I'm on here, we can get important information.
I've got you as
But
Matt on the overlay. If I knew that, I would have put Matthew on there. Maybe
again, like I said, it's my own fault. I've brought it on myself with the nick, so
Mhm.
whatever, it's fine.
I did spot on your website. You said there are a lot of people called Matthew Miller. I just did because when I bring someone on, especially someone who like has some sort of history behind them, I can usually find your LinkedIn or something like that, just see the things you've done in the past. I type in Matthew Miller, and it's like 7 other people before I get to you. So I'm like Matthew Miller Linux, and luckily you're the only Matthew Miller in the Linux space, at least of note.
There's
You're the most
somebody
notable
who's
if there is another one.
that's good. I'm glad I've gotten there. There was somebody like a writer for like ZDNet or something that was often causing
Mhm.
confusion for a while. And yeah, at Red Hat, there's actually 3 other Matthew Millers. And the funny thing is, we've all been there for like 10 years. I
Oh
thought
no.
expected the number to go up or down, but it's like we got the 4 of us.
If I just kept
Uh,
going like more and more specific, honestly, if I just started with Matthew Miller Fedora project leader, I would have got there from the start. I don't know why I went through the whole hassle of doing the other stuff.
I I wish I would have like done this over time. Maybe there's because like at the at the geek peak of
Mhm.
like the internet, like when Google was new and like the search results would all come back, being the most nerdy things possible
Mhm. Mhm.
because only nerds were really using it.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
I was Matthew Miller, you'd get me.
Yep.
And yeah, I don't know where I am. I don't actually track this where I am in the Matthew Miller search rankings.
I
But
think there's a
it's
politician called
probably
Matthew
down
Miller.
there. Yeah, a politician. There's a there's several journalists.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this is not a I want a Wikipedia page for myself. I don't need one. But I mean, everybody would like a Wikipedia page. Come on,
Sure.
I want to be famous. But um, I find it kind of frustrating that a lot of people in open source who have
Mhm.
done huge amount of things are not seen as notable
Mhm.
by the standards there, whereas everybody who's played like minor league sports gets their own entry because of course look, they've been in all these newspapers, they
Yep.
must be famous, like,
Yeah.
oh,
Exactly.
so you'll find plenty of those Matthew Millers too. No judgment against them, some judgment against Wikipedia, because come on, that's not a good standard for notability. And I really do think there are a lot of stories of people who've done amazing things in open source who
Mhm.
are underrepresented and don't get the recognition that they deserve. So actually, having people on podcasts, that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
doing this journalism where you talk to people, it's awesome and important.
Well, look, I know you are mentioned by name on the Fedora Wikipedia page, so like I don't know why you wouldn't
Okay,
have a
okay.
page
I
of
don't know.
your
I haven't looked at that. I have gotten in trouble before by trying to edit the Fedora Wikipedia page, which, as you know, is a no-no. But some things
own.
were so just wrong on
Mhm.
there. It still could use some help. If anybody's
Mhm.
watching this, you want to like fix the Wikipedia page a little bit, I'd love that. But yeah.
Well, on the topic of websites, you're mentioning before that there's this new website for Fedora. I wasn't aware this was a new website, but it does look really sleek.
Yeah.
I am
It
sort of
it
not doing it justice because I've got it like covering half the screen, so it's sort of like the mobile view right now. But it looks really good.
Yeah, this is actually a really good community story too,
Mhm.
because um we had the first the sorry the most recent major redesign of the website
Mhm.
was really back in 2014, although there was a kind of a big like engine redo somewhere in the middle, and a lot of actually work I don't want to discredit because I've said this wrong before, and then people were like, wait, what about this? So, but the first, like the real like conceptual change was back in, like 2000, I don't know, 14, 15, something like that, a really long time ago. And that was a lot of work by mostly some people at Red Hat, and then also we had someone who had been like doing Fedora website stuff for a long time. And there is a pattern that we've seen in Fedora, and it can happen in a lot of places where there's a team of people, but eventually, like one person, who's been there the longest, whoever kind of becomes the person, and this person who was really good was kind of, was the websites guy, and there was sort of a thing where instead of it really being a team, it just became an individual. And there's some pride in that, and there's some things that are good about that. In some, like, people should be recognized, like I was just saying, for what they do and get to own things, and that's amazing. But eventually, and sort of suddenly, he got a different job, and turned out in his day job he didn't have all this time.
Right.
And so I went back to Red Hat, and I was like, okay, we don't have this volunteer anymore. Obviously, we need the website updated. Can we get resources to update the website? And it turned out the answer was no. From Red, and there's a whole complicated thing about how Red Hat provides resources to Fedora. And
I did want to get into that at some point. We'd have to talk about that for sure.
But yeah, a lot of it's a lot less than people think. And so we were kind of struggling for a really long time. And just recently, though, someone who was a community volunteer, not a Red Hatter. I like to make sure that Red Hatters are also included in community. We really try not to make that's the community, this is Red Hatters distinction, because that's not Fedora at all. But yeah, he was actually hired to work in the community platform engineering team on Fedora after being involved in the project from other days. And he was like, not by himself at all, but was able to get like, okay, I can put a little bit of my time into this, and then with some other amazing people, and I'm not going to name names because what will happen is I will forget somebody, and this is the recognition
That's
thing.
a good
but
idea,
I like everybody is amazing, and there's so much good work on this, and people really came together to both people who've been around the project for a while and some like net new contributors to like figure out how to make this website, the design, the content management engine behind it, and like honestly the philosophy of it, all work together with our design team and the websites team to make what's really a great, amazing website for the project that is truly community powered, and also behind the scenes has a content management engine so that instead of needing to contact the website team for updates, if you are, for example, the IoT working group, the team working on that can actually own their own content and messaging in their section and update that and change what it says and how things are laid out there without having to go through permission or bureaucracy from some other team. So it's nice. I really like it.
Is there a repo somewhere I can point people to find out who actually worked on it? Because if there is, you want to know who worked on it, look at that.
In fact, let's see.
Just so you don't forget names, just look at the repo and you'll see who's done it.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if you go to the bottom of the website there's a line, help improve this website, and it links to the CMS and to the GitLab repo, and you can see all of the people there.
On CMS. GitLab repo. Here we go. I will, I guess, leave this in the description. Shout out to Nico, who made the most recent commit. I don't know how much Nico's done, but shout out to Nico.
He's one of the people who have done a huge amount. It's been really great.
No, it definitely does look really good. Absolutely. Like, it's a real sleek design. It's not like, the problem with you'll see a lot of modern website design where there's just no content. It's just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Like, everything.
Pretty thing. Yeah.
Like, the Apple website is the worst example of this. Like, it's just a product picture. You scroll for like 5 minutes and then you eventually get to something important.
Yeah, so we didn't have that much scrolling before, but one of the problems we actually had with our previous design was a failed project, which is something at the time, the search engine optimization wisdom was that it was better to have lots of separate domains all interlinked, which is we're back to one domain is better. I don't know, whatever. That's not my
I'm not
area,
the person to ask about that.
But that was part of it, and also we were looking at things like Mozilla, where they had Get Firefox, and so we wanted to have kind of are you a user or are you a contributor? How are you coming to the project? And for the user-facing thing, we wanted to have this pretty crisp Get Fedora. What do you want to do? You want to get download it, get going, and that's so we had getfedora.org, and then fedoraproject.org was going to be a thing called Fedora Hubs, which
Okay.
was one of the problems we've had for a long time in Fedora, and it only, I think it's getting better, but a lot of our activity when I joined the project, it was on IRC, and even then, when I joined the project, it definitely was. But sorry, when I joined as Fedora project leader, I've been at Fedora for 20 years. I've been Fedora project leader for 9 now.
Wait, 20,
so what?
20 years. Wait, you've been involved since basically the start then, pretty much.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
actually involved with like the Red Hat Linux.
Okay.
Before in some ways as a community fan, and so I
Right.
was involved very very early. I won't say I was one of the most instrumental people at the beginning. I was just kind of around though. You could find me whining about things on the mailing list. Some of the early posts very embarrassing, but I think I was helpful some as well. I'm also
Well, you're
really
the
easy to
project leader now,
distract.
so surely you're
What was
at least a
what
little
was I
helpful.
talking about? Oh yeah, so it actually we were kind of in a bad place just for various reasons, but there actually was a huge amount of activity, but most of it was on these I think IRC, a lot of like just chat all the time, and then even like formal meetings. There were, I think, that year 1,100 IRC Fedora IRC meetings held, which that's like there's a lot going on. But if you looked at our website, our online presence, it looked like, oh, is this a dead project? Is anybody here?
Right.
And we have a wiki, but our wiki is not like the Arch wiki. It is a do whatever you want wiki, which is very useful, but means that like the levels of curation are hugely variable. Some
Right.
things are people keep up to date, and then you click on something and it's like a page copied from a decade ago that no one's maintained but looks important but actually isn't. It's like a trap. So there was that, but it didn't look well maintained. And yeah, and then mailing lists. There's a whole thing about mailing lists, but that's also invisible to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So the idea was we would have this thing called Fedora Hubs, which wouldn't be a replacement interface or anything, but would be kind of like a dynamic feed showing all of this activity and showing the different teams. You'd have a hub for the design team and for the desktop team and for the server and all these things, and each hub would show all of the activity of that team and help you get connected and be all really exciting. This was great. We just overreached, didn't have the resources to do it, and a lot of postmortem could be done, but it never happened. So we were then ending up basically with Get Fedora being our main website, and you'll see a lot of places. It was never meant to be our main website. That was meant to be the brochure download page.
Right.
So finally we're getting around here. This isn't nearly as ambitious as the hubs thing for all of that, being a social media feed kind of thing, but it's meant to be more dynamic, and we do want to actually have some of that social feed things there. I think maybe we'll hook up some activity pub stuff or something. I don't know.
That should be that crazy difficult to do.
Right. Yeah. It kind of show what's going on, and keep it something that's live and moving, and it is back at the main fedoraproject.org home site there as well. So I don't even remember what question I was answering.
We were talking about the new website. That you stayed on topic there. It was fine.
All right, good, excellent.
You did briefly mention like IRC and mailing lists in there. Like, so how much of the communication with Fedora nowadays is done in those sort of systems? How have you like migrated away from that? I'll see a lot of stuff on the mailing list, like, but I don't. Yeah.
I recently just threw a gigantic grenade in Fedora Devel list, which is our main mailing list where people interact. So I'm a huge fan of the discourse forum system. I know not everybody is, and I didn't grow up a forum system. I like for a forum person. Like I hate PHP BB style things. Oh, it's awful and terrible design.
Right.
Honestly, Usenet, like they that got a lot
Oh,
Um,
sorry, you cut out really badly right there.
oh, sorry. Usenet, is that censored somehow automatically?
I don't know,
I
man.
don't.
I don't know what happened there. Weird Australian internet things. So don't worry about it. You were saying Usenet
Yeah,
and then it cut out.
yeah. Usenet. They got a lot of things right with the design of that as a conversation platform,
Mhm.
except for it has no authentication, and spammers and other things
Right,
basically
right.
destroyed its usefulness. Oh well. But forums have not been really very good.
Hmm.
And uh, I've got a soft spot for mailing lists. I've been communicating in mailing lists for a long time, but they
Hmm.
also have some big disadvantages. And one of them is that they are really hard for new people.
Right.
And just the like sign up barrier is difficult, and just mailing list culture and how to interact. And now I've got to sign up, and now I'm on a list forever. Oh no!
I
Like,
think that barrier is also bigger today as well because a lot of like young developers, if you're getting involved in a lot of newer projects, they're doing communication on like, a Discord or a Matrix or something like that, where it's a
yeah,
very different style of like getting in. Like you just join a thing, you probably have an account in some other server already. You just join it, it's good to go.
yeah. So there are a lot of people. I mean, there are a lot of things that people like about mailing lists, and
Mm-hmm.
one of them is that people have a workflow set up,
Yeah.
and it all comes to you, and you can skim it and so on. So that's been pretty important,
Mm-hmm.
and people don't want to lose that.
Right, right.
Um, but um, I Yeah, I feel like the downsides are pretty high of having that as
Well,
our
they
main
also are
main
fairly easy
platform.
to archive as well. That's another really big
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
advantage.
Right. That's another thing. And having my own local archive, having it offline access. Yeah, that is an
Or
important
just a public
thing.
archive. Just
Oh,
anyone who's not
sure.
involved in the mailing list can just, easily scroll through it and you see what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. It's something other than like the main site or whatever. If the
Yeah,
site is
yeah.
down or whatever. Yeah, that's definitely true. Um, but I so the grenade that I threw into the devel list was that I really think we should close down that list and move everything over to the discourse forum,
Oh.
which is a very big change in how things work. And I want to make sure that we make it so we bring people along as
Hmm.
well. I don't want to, lose people um, just for that. And I would hate to. It is
Yeah.
a change in workflow, and
Hmm.
changes like it actually causes pain in your brain to
Yeah.
have things moved from where they were. And I'm not kidding, it's real.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's hard, and it's gonna be hard for some people, but we're going to try it out, at first with like our changes process, and then maybe with other things as we go. And I think that will really help make it a lot more accessible, make the activity more visible, and give us some better tools for better conversations. Where
Hmm.
often mailing list threads, be, you you can moderate mailing lists only with a very big hammer, of
Right.
I will ban this person, and it's often after the fact, and once a message has gone out, it's there. So forum gives us a little more ability to not just block things, but to encourage people to rephrase,
Hmm.
or to split topics into different things. If something goes off topic, it's
Right.
okay. The off topic thing might actually be important, but let's have this topic over here.
Right.
So all
Right.
those kind of thing, modern tools are nice. So I really would like us to move more to that, and that's a challenge. It's one of the
Hmm.
how do you get there from here things. um, I think on my side in that is the general collapse, just like Usenet failed before, of email as a usable platform,
Hmm.
which I know people are disappointed by because it's decentralized and so on, and all of these things, at least theoretically.
Hmm.
But really, there's a handful, a half dozen of big mail providers,
Yeah.
and for a while, fighting spam was a big deal.
Hmm.
But actually, at the scale they are at, spam is not a problem.
Hmm.
It's annoyance, but they don't like they have the visibility into everything and exchanges with each other to control it for their systems. But I don't know how many of you all are nerdy enough to run your own mail server like I still do. It's insane the amount of spam that
Hmm.
comes in, and I can run spam assassin and whatever, but I don't have the scope to pick that up,
Right.
and therefore other the big mail providers have less and less incentive to even care
Hmm.
about mail from smaller providers, and I know, and it's not going to be long before basically mail has to go through a
Mhm.
major provider, or else it will not be delivered. I know that's like sounds like doom and gloom, but that's the way email's going, and that also matches like people's use of email changes. I can't
Mhm.
remember the last time I've exchanged an email with a friend. That's like, we used to do that. It was back then we
Yeah.
used to remember when people sent letters. Now we have email. Ha ha ha. Now email was like sending I writing out a letter longhand and putting it in the mail and
Mhm.
sending somebody an email, a personal email, seem about the same kind of antique to me now.
Honestly, for
Uh,
me, most of my emails I send are for the people who prefer to use email to talk about doing the podcast. That's pretty much it.
Right,
Most,
yeah, right, yeah. There's coordination stuff like that can
yeah,
happen, and then it's like business exchange
yeah,
stuff, or
exactly.
like my receipts go to my email, and
Mm-mm.
my
Right.
login information, and
And the
all the
thousand
things
of
that I
websites you've given your
the,
email to that keep
yeah,
sending you
the
spam
things they
email.
say that I get things because I opted in and I did not opt in. Oh, I'm
Nope.
tired of arguing. Right, yeah, right. So email's falling apart, and this wasn't supposed to be a podcast where I rant about email,
That's
but
fine.
like we need to move to other things.
Mhm.
But I would actually like to make sure we can have some of those strengths. And Discourse is an open source platform. It's got the API is not a beautiful API and it's underdocumented, but it does have one. And so I'd actually there is actually an ActivityPub plugin. It's not good yet, but I would like to explore our things for making other archives. Actually,
Uh-huh.
somebody had. I, this is one of those things that I should not do, but am very tempted to work on. Um, it would not be that hard to make something that that uses the API and the webhooks of the system to take every post and mirror it to a read-only Usenet or news server, and people
Uh-huh.
can connect to it with their news clients and read it that way if they want. Um,
That's actually a good.
uh,
I know you're saying that's actually a good
oh,
idea though.
I know it's a good idea. I just shouldn't do it because I've got so much other things to do.
No,
But
fair
if
enough.
somebody wants to work on this, I've got thoughts. Talk to me because I think it would be really useful, and I think actually other people running Discourse would be able to use it. And one of the
Mhm.
things people were complaining about, which I think is also valid, this is actually Jonathan Corbett, who does Linux Weekly News, was saying that now everything he's kind of has everything in one place, and it
Right.
feels like having everybody on their own uh, Discourse server somewhere kind of feels now like everything is separate,
Mhm.
and you can get notifications in your email, but the email we have people who basically use it only by email, but
Mhm.
explicitly in the design from the project, the emails really are to get you to the website. The
Right,
website's
right.
where you should be there, and people maybe don't want to do that. So if we could do this a Usenet bridge, we could actually set up a thing where we could have a bunch of different. It could support a hierarchy as it does, Usenet does, of different things. We could have org, Fedora, whatever, and then have our stuff there, and
Mhm.
GNOME and whatever else could all be in a mirrored on the same server, so people could look at it all together. I don't know about posting from
Mhm.
there because of the authentication problems,
Right.
but you know, uh, at least reading it and then having links to go reply and interact would be cool. So yeah, there's a project for somebody who wants to work on
If anyone
something.
happens to be interested in setting that up, yeah, get in contact with Matthew, see what he wants to do. Earlier you're mentioning like there's not really many ways to deal with spam with like a mailing list and like people trying to basically just waste your time. Like I would imagine, I've not really seen it myself, but I would imagine a project at the scale of Fedora has some amount of people doing that. Like, how many people really are there just trying to just, waste time on the mailing list, just posting absolute nonsense? Like, not just like taking things off topic, but just genuinely bad faith actors.
Only a handful, really.
Hmm.
And it's there are more people who have trouble interacting in a healthy way who actually mean well, and I
Right,
think that's
right.
the hardest thing because there's this thing that I subscribe to, that one toxic person in your community is never worth it. No matter how much they've contributed, the damage they do is worse than anything they can add, which
Right.
I definitely believe. But I also believe in the fundamental good in people and that people can learn and change.
Mhm.
And so I want to address all these things with that in mind, and that people don't have to be. A lot of people who care about Fedora, about the project, about open source,
Mhm.
may not know how to communicate their passions.
Mhm.
Obviously, I think in tech in general, and maybe open source especially, we have a lot of people who are not neurotypical. I have ADHD, which is a struggle for me.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's fun when I can do a podcast and I'm going in every direction, and ADHD is
Look, that's
great.
totally
Uh,
fine with me. Yeah, if you want
yeah,
to just
right,
go in
yeah, right.
anywhere.
But it can also, it's a challenge in getting things done and being productive
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes,
yeah.
and and sometimes in communicating with people as well. And so we have a lot of people with many different kinds of ways their brains work. Not,
Mhm.
certainly not just ADHD. Uh, and a lot of times we have people from different parts of the world with
Mhm.
different
Mhm.
worldviews, different ways of communicating, just different approaches. Um, yeah, like we have one thing. My boss, when I started as the Fedora project leader, gave me a book about communicating in different cultures. I
Mhm.
forget what the title is. I think is it bow, kiss, or shake hands? I think that's what it is. Uh,
Let's see if
Kiss, bow, or shake hands. Yeah, and
Kiss,
it's an interesting thing. It's
bow,
got
shake
different
hands.
countries and a little bit, just like a quick cultural summary. And one of the things I learned there, Red Hat has a big office in the Czech Republic.
Mhm. Mhm.
And one of the things that I found from this book, and that's validated with people that I know, is that um, making a request where you make it a personal request, like, hey, could you please do this for me,
Mhm. Mhm.
is very strong. Like that is taken as a personal obligation favor. And in America, we say that very casually.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy to accidentally ask for a strong personal favor for someone when you just
Right.
meant hey, here's that idea. So like being aware of those things is really important. And another one, in some cultures, it is saying no is seen as very rude.
Right.
So it is the appropriate thing to do when you mean I will not do that, is to say yes I will do that, and then not do that, which is much more polite
Uh-huh.
than saying no. What right, and again,
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
an American, like that's shocking and
Yeah.
could be very frustrating,
Mhm.
because someone who's just trying to be polite to you and now they're just not holding up to their commitments. And
Mhm.
right, so
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
understanding all these things about how people interact in mailing lists, and things that may seem to be in bad, seem harmful,
Mhm.
can
Mhm.
sometimes just be misunderstandings, which I hope we can
Right.
work out. um, on the other hand, we do have to look at the impact. Like if it is causing trouble, we need to act.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
doesn't
Mhm.
matter if it was meant well; it matters what happened. And
Right.
so that's a whole really, I don't know. It's an ongoing challenge in any community, I think.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, especially a community that is very like worldwide, like like if it was just like, hey, this is the project that Americans work on, like it would be pretty. Even then, there's still like some differences between states, but it's a much easier thing to manage when you're just dealing with like a region like that. But I can see how there would be also just language barriers. Like when you are dealing with people that may not have English as like a native language, they might phrase things in a way or might read something in a way that the person saying it to them wasn't intending it to mean.
Yeah, we often on like Ask Fedora help forum. We sometimes get people who um, are interpreted as being very demanding about their
Mhm.
response, but really they're just in panic because their system's not working right. And sometimes we see people like, "Hey, stop demanding anything. You're not going to get an answer from us if you act that way."
Mhm.
And really, they didn't mean it that way. And so I don't know. There's a little bit of charity and interpretation, which
Mhm.
helps. On the other hand, please don't come to Ask Fedora and demand answers. There have been people who have been doing that, and then
I'm
like,
sure.
yeah. Uh, this makes Red Hat look bad. I'm gonna, something IBM stock. No,
Every time I mention,
it's
every single
it's
time
gonna
I
be
mention
fine.
anything to do with Fedora, it goes. I talk about Fedora, comments then go Red Hat, then IBM, and everyone's just like IBM, IBM, IBM. Like, can we just Can we talk about the thing I was actually talking about? Like, let's not do that right now.
Yeah, yeah. You know, um, I'll say quickly, IBM, obviously there's some influence. They're a big company, and
Mhm,
Red Hat's now a big company. But Red Hat is really operated independently,
mhm,
and
mhm,
even before IBM bought the company, it was a publicly traded company with shareholders, and in part of American capitalist system. And the things that IBM is asking from Red Hat are really no different from what the stock market was
right.
asking from Red Hat as an independent company. So when I say, trust me, it wasn't IBM, it's really true. It wasn't.
Mhm,
Sometimes it's Red Hat being a company with 20,000 employees, billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar revenue company is that's a big company. Sometimes it's just like that's what's happening. We can mess things up all by ourselves. Don't need to. It would be nice. It actually, it's tempting to be like a scapegoat. IBM, yeah, IBM's fault.
mhm.
IBM's fault. But let's take some ownership here.
Well, it would also be nice if you were like directly integrated in Red Hat and had the entire Red Hat budget to work with on Fedora.
Yeah, right. And so that's we mentioned earlier. Fedora, like so, I do not have anybody who reports to me. I
Mhm,
report reasonably high up into the Linux organization at Red Hat, but I
mhm,
don't like report to the CEO or anything. Um, and although there are a lot of people who are paid um, to work on a job where Fedora work is a component, where so
right.
they may maintain, some software, and so working in Fedora as part of that is how they do it.
Mhm,
There are not really very many people paid to work full time on Fedora at Red Hat.
mhm,
There are people I mentioned the community platform engineering team that basically does supports the infrastructure for build infrastructure for CentOS Stream and
mhm,
for Fedora. And then Justin is our community architect, paid out of the open source program office.
mhm,
There are a number of other people like that. That we have a QA team that is full time as
mhm,
well. I'm
mhm.
sorry, I'm supposed to say quality team now. They wanted me to stop with the assurance because it's we're trying our best here.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, 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 yeah.
so we have that, but that is also we try to make it so that these roles are not the role doing it. The
Uh-huh,
quality
uh-huh.
team is there to enable community quality team and make
Mhm,
sure that there's a backstop, that someone's there, but mostly to work on enablement. A lot of companies have a mission statement that is a bunch of BS, and I Red Hats though is was actually developed by a bunch of Red Hatters working together in a kind of crazy way of in public, and I will not be able to quote the entire thing because it's got a few more words than it should because it's done by a committee. But the point of it is to make better technology with open source
mhm,
by acting as catalysts in communities and with partners. So rather than by doing it, like what Red Hat is trying to do is find how we can multiply
mhm.
the effort. And so I think that that's the investment in Fedora when it's at its best is working that way as
I
well.
think I
Uh,
just found it. Where is it? Catalyst. To be the catalyst in communities of customers, contributors, and partners, creating better technology the open source way. And then a lot more words that I'm not going to read.
yeah, yeah, right, yeah, but yeah, it's good. So and that I think is what we Red Hat tries to do with their investment. I'm happy that they pay me full
Mhm,
time to work on this. It's amazing, but really the bulk of work in Fedora is done by people who are not employed by Red Hat,
mhm,
and Red Hat works by working in that community. And there's a lot of times where people are like, Fedora exists only as a rel beta or
mhm,
upstream for
mhm.
Red Hat or a testing playground for Red Hat, and that's really not true. It exists for its own sake, and Red Hat sees value in it. But um, there is value to Red Hat. They wouldn't pay me otherwise to do what I do. Honestly, we
Yeah.
wouldn't need my job if it were just that beta. But we want it to be a functioning actual community with its own interests,
Mhm.
and that's completely vital. And I feel like there actually aren't a lot of it's somewhat unique in open source how this works, and I think it's worked pretty well.
Hmm.
It's worked well enough that Amazon is now basing Amazon Linux on Fedora and working with Fedora, and they didn't come and demand that Red Hat transfer everything to a foundation and not work this way, because they see, okay, there's been these years of stewardship.
There's
It
something that
is
works
really
here.
it's really an open source project we can get involved in, and it's not just a Red Hat backdoor thing. So I think that's been some nice validation that
Hmm.
we're doing things well. And that's true, obviously, Amazon, very large, but it's true of
Well, that's one way to put it. Yeah.
smaller companies and individuals. It's that same, you should get the value for yourself in
Hmm.
working in Fedora,
Hmm.
and helping build an operating system that belongs to all of us. I think that's kind of what I love about it. Um, you can be a Windows fanboy or
Right.
fangirl or fan whatever you would like to be, um, or an Apple diehard. But even if you work for Apple,
Hmm.
like, that doesn't belong to you. That belongs to the ghost of Steve Jobs and the shareholders, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But when you work on Fedora, like that, Red Hat may own the trademarks, but
Right.
like when you work on Fedora, you are part of it, and it is your thing. It's like having it, you own it, and you can
Hmm.
do what you want with it, and you can help build it and make it better, and that's amazing and powerful. Uh, and yeah, like I'm happy to be part of that. I think that's making the world better
It
that
definitely
way.
sounds like you're happy involved with it.
I don't know. You got a skeptical there. What's
No, no. Maybe that's just the way I speak. I no, that's you definitely sound like you've been involved for this, what, 20 years, you said? Yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah,
wouldn't have been involved for 20 years if this didn't like catch your interest, if it wasn't something you really wanted to work on.
yeah. And it is really 9 years as project leader here, which is, um, if anybody is calling for my resignation or my head, they're doing it quietly in the background. I haven't
Well,
heard
when
any.
is your 10th anniversary as project leader?
So it'll be it, I it's the beginning of June, so it'll
Well,
be
you
a year in June.
mhm.
Um,
You got a
will
little bit
be
longer
10.
left until someone can
Right.
get rid of you then.
It's 10 is the limit.
There you
It
go.
may be. There should probably at some point some fresh ideas should come in,
Mhm.
but I really try to listen and not. Um, you know, I, I I don't have the ability to dictate,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
also that means it wouldn't work if I just tried to tell everybody what to do. So I
Mhm.
want to make sure there's room for people with new ideas and
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
tell me what they think and come and shape things.
So, as your role as project leader, what do you actually like? What do you do in this position?
Right, yeah, like the what is my day to day
Yeah,
kind
basically.
of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of meetings with people,
Mhm.
just like video calls and chats and whatever. And it's hard to. That's very useful, the one-on-one kind of things. It's
Mhm.
hard to figure out how much that scales. There's some internal Red Hat stuff. A lot of trying to be um, active in our in the forums, on our mailing lists, and
Mhm.
seeing what's going on, talking with people there, and then uh, writing up. Uh, in general, my job, I, it's to make sure everything goes smoothly
Right.
and to help the project have a coherent strategy that we're working
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my main thing, and I think you've seen I've been kind of working on what our next like big strategy is, with the Fedora Council.
Mhm.
The recent layoffs and things, which I don't want to talk
Yeah,
about,
no,
but
that's totally fair.
that's kind of shaken things up a little bit. So it's not like it's ruined anything, but it's kind of just put my interview for that on pause for a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
But I'll come back to that soon. It's very important. But um, yeah, and some of this, what I'm doing now here, talking
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
other people outside the project and kind of sharing what we do and who we are is part of it as well.
Mhm.
But I think overall, I've uh, one of the nature of any sort of like community volunteer project without a really strong hierarchy. I mean, there are
Mhm.
some kind of things where there's a like, this is our charity, this is our mission, do this or don't do anything. But
Mhm.
where we let people kind of explore things, it is to diffuse in every different direction. It's like releasing a cylinder full of gas molecules into a room. It'll go into
Mm-hmm.
every corner, and you'll explore the shape.
Right,
And that's
right, right.
actually really powerful. That's like where a lot of innovation comes from, because you have people often in some weird corner of the room that nobody would have looked in, and that's amazing. But also, if it keeps going, it just becomes thin air and nothing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything
You don't
nothing's
want to
connected.
stretch yourself too thin.
Right. So there's some amount of figuring out, okay, how in all of these people going in their different directions, what's our commonalities? What do we care about?
Mhm.
And what are the things that we can decide to focus on, even if they're not the things, you know, individual people, some people might not care about that thing so much, but if we can get people to agree, okay, here are going to be some of our focuses, and then we can kind of intentionally move there, rather than kind of staying in one place, because
Mhm.
there is helping make sure that that happens is really my job. And um, it's a thing that um, I don't know. I'm not sure to explain how to do it, but it's there's one of my favorite Futurama episodes,
Mhm.
is the one where Bender is drifting through space and
Mhm.
becomes accidentally the god of a small
Oh,
civilization,
yeah,
right?
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. I've seen
and
Futurama
everything
bits.
he tries, he messes it up. And then finally, the punchline is he basically learns that if he's doing his job well,
Mhm.
nobody notices that he's done anything.
Mhm.
um, that's not a good way to get promotions and raises. But it is something, when you're in a position like this, or any kind of leadership position in community, like, um, yeah, there's something to that careful light touch,
Mhm.
because it can really get a lot done, and making sure that people are empowered to do the things rather than taking that for yourself.
Well, okay, let's go all the way back to when you first got involved in Fedora. So you said you were doing some stuff with Red Hat Linux at the time, the thing
Yeah.
prior to, for anyone who hasn't heard me talk about it before, Red Hat Linux is the thing that existed before Red Hat Enterprise Linux. They are two separate things. Red Hat Linux no longer exists.
Yeah, so I was a sysadmin at Boston University.
Mhm.
There's a whole story there, but uh, I was a Linux fan,
Mhm.
and my job was for commercial Unix, Solaris, IRIX, some beautiful SGI, really fun, terribly insecure systems, um, and yeah, all sorts of weird stuff.
Mhm.
The main campus servers were AIX, which I was out of scope for me.
Mhm.
That was
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
central at like, but I got to play with the ones all around the university. But those were expensive, and
Mhm.
this was 2000. So well, starting to see how old I am. Um, Departments were starting to be like, well, we can't afford whatever $20,000. We're the foreign languages department. But we want to have a web server.
Right.
So and back then you couldn't just like have somebody host something for you in a reasonable way. It was like so. People would buy a PC or have
Mhm.
an old PC, be literally under some grad student's desk. They would put Linux on it, and then, because also back then every IP address in the university was exposed directly to the internet.
Oh, that seems like a good
Right.
idea.
And not only was that just the architecture, because there wasn't like the firewalling NAT stuff to make that not happen. Didn't wasn't scalable yet. That's
Right,
how it
right.
was. It was also seen as like that's an important part of internet freedom and academic
Huh.
freedom. Everybody, so like it was
Okay,
it.
that's fair.
People strongly believed in that. You connect to the internet. You connect to the internet. You're not some sort of reduced client kind of thing. You are on the internet.
Right,
So
okay, that's fair.
it's fair, but also around that time, one of the Linux magazines did a study where they installed the latest distributions,
Mhm.
plugged them in, and waited till they were broken into. And like at the time, I think Red Hat Linux won
Mhm.
because it took 15 minutes before it was compromised, right? So
Yeah, okay.
like security just wasn't a focus. And there were things like there'd be an account named printer with the password printer, and then that account basically having root equivalents. Like great. um So our security team at the university was basically spending more and more time running around to people, to departments saying, you can't run Linux. It's not secure. Stop that.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, and I was young and in my 20s and full of energy, and I thought, this is open source. We could fix these problems. How hard can it be? And so I looked at some of the things out there for hardening. There was a thing called Bastille. I didn't actually end up using those things, but kind of looked at what needed to be done to make it so these systems could survive. Added some scripts for automatic updates. There weren't automatic updates. Things like Yum wasn't invented yet, right?
Oh, okay.
So those things weren't there. So added some scripts to do that, and made some things to hook it into our central account system, Kerberos system, all those things, and took that and actually pitched that to my boss, and then to the VP of IT, who was a wonderful, geeky, wonderful person who had actually been at the university since he was a student in the 70s, when he had actually written a OS that they ran on their mainframe at the time. So he had a soft spot for this project, and we ended up launching. I actually have
What?
here's Boston University Linux here.
Oh,
Actually
I was
that's
wondering
the
what that.
later one. Yeah. So here's the first one here, or one of the first ones.
Hey, there we go.
Which yeah, so we actually made this distribution, and rather than doing things from scratch, I because it's open source, I took Red Hat Linux as it was and modified the RPMs to have the changes I wanted, rebuilt them, and recomposed it all to distribution. And so that was going along pretty great, and we actually started running some of our central servers on it, because that cost savings was useful to the IT, not just to the poor departments. So that was a pretty big success. And then the whole thing with the RHEL Fedora split happened, and it was hard to figure out what to do, because where they're positioning Fedora. It wasn't ready for being the base for what we're doing.
Right.
These days, honestly, I would happily recommend anybody who wants to do something like that. We're in a great place. You could base your thing
You're a
on
completely
Fedora.
unbiased source to say this.
Yeah, absolutely. But we've worked hard on it. It's been some years.
Sure.
But back then, things were pretty rough, and I've got a talk. I'm actually going to be giving this talk at DevConf in Czech Republic in a couple of weeks here.
Awesome.
And I did the same thing at Linux Summit a little while ago, about 35 Fedora releases in 30 minutes. We're going to go into the history of some of this, and I won't repeat it all here, but there were some rough things at the early times. But I got involved as part of that, and through that, I met Seth Vidal, who was actually the guy who wrote Yum. He was an admin at oh no, was it Duke? I think it was Duke or NC, somewhere in North Carolina. And then he was a wonderful person who was just very caring and friendly, and really encouraged me to work together and collaborate. Don't just do this thing, over at BU. We could share all of these things. So that kind of helped me let's put all our changes upstream that we can, and those kind of things get involved directly in the project. So yeah, that's kind of how I got involved in the early days there.
Well, okay. So when did you? So you're saying you'd already had some Unix experience at that point. When did you first get involved in that then?
Yeah, so that was again, I had that account on a Vax in my college in small town Indiana, and I had a friend who's a couple years older than me. He graduated and discovered that suddenly he no longer had email, because any internet access. Email was a key thing, but all the other things, Usenet, and this emerging World Wide Web thing, right?
Yeah.
He didn't have it anymore, because it was only there weren't internet providers. So I was in the process. I was working in the IT department at that small college as a student employee, and had kind of set up help set up their dial-in services, because that was a thing they wanted to consider for it was actually for the students and faculty, not for general. But so my friend who'd graduated, no good for him.
Just
so I had
for
set that up.
context, what is a dial-in service? This is a bit before my time.
Oh my God. Okay. Yes.
For reference, I was born in 1998. Okay. I'm like 25.
No. That's a fair call. You just made me feel extremely old. Right. So now we've got wires that go to your house that bring you the internet back and forth. But previously, people just had their phone line. Cable, maybe had cable, but actually cable, even like cable for TV, was kind of a luxury thing. It wasn't. People mostly had broadcast TV, and then they'd have a phone line, and that phone line was used for talking on the phone, which people did a lot. And then you could have a modem, and so there were bulletin board services you could dial up and connect your computer directly to another computer, okay. And that, and then the internet providers, which would actually provide internet services over that dial-up connection, and then you would tell your parents, I'm going to be using the phone for the next 3 hours.
Okay.
And then then you would consume the phone line, and then they would pick it up, or their friends would go, and everybody would be mad because you're using your phone line for it. And that would cost something like $20 a month, $50 a month, whatever, for very, very slow. This is like 14.4 kilobytes per bits per. I forget. Okay, now I'm nerdy people in the comments. Please tell me how wrong I am about whether it's bits or bytes. But it was a long time ago. Very, very slow. So we basically bought a T1 line, a fast interconnection, to the accounting firm where my friend's dad owned that, and we started up a little small business making our dial-in service there. And
I see.
We originally were doing it on Windows because that's what we knew. That turned out to be terrible, and so we, in the middle of something being broken in Windows one night, we were like, "What if we tried this Linux thing?" And ordered some CDs from a back of a magazine, installed Linux, and kind of just started playing with it and learning that way. Which, by the way, is still the best way to learn Linux. Install it, play it with it. Break things, try to build an internet provider. I don't know, try to build something. It doesn't need probably something that would be useful these days. But that's how I got into it.
I thought there's some additional context I was missing here about dialing. I knew what dial-up was. I thought there was just something else I was missing there. That's fair. Also, my first.
There's probably are going to be people listening who are even younger than you that will be like, "Wow, I had no idea."
Well, also for reference, I grew up in rural Queensland with two parents who grew up on farms. I didn't have an internet connection until 2005. My first connection was DSL. My parents didn't know what the internet was. They didn't want the internet. We didn't have a computer at home until around that same time as well.
Right, but a DSL, of course, is luxury because that's always on and at least 10 times as fast, right? So, but yeah.
I wouldn't have said that in like 2000. Australia in 2005. I would be lucky to get 1 megabit, which is definitely faster.
Again, oh my god, that is so many times faster.
Top end of dial-up, you can get
56K.
No, okay, I thought for some reason my brain was thinking 256K.
We can go back
56K, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
This is definitely a pointless argument.
Oh no, it doesn't matter at all.
So yeah. Anyways, I carried my internet uphill both ways in the snow. Yeah.
And now, you can get a fiber connection to your house and have symmetrical gigabit if you live in a place like South Korea.
Yeah, or faster.
Yeah.
Insane.
So, let's see. So, you're saying Fedora's had issues over the years with, like, especially early on, but, like, one of the things that Fedora, I've noticed, does fairly often is adopting new technologies probably a little bit before they're ready. Like, Wayland, for example, was Fedora 21 when that was brought in with GNOME, then Pipewire back in 2021, you guys were looking at it.
Yeah, it's a careful balance. I mean, we definitely have in our mission, and this partly comes from the split from RHEL, where
Mhm,
this
mhm,
like Fedora is supposed to be fast moving, but
mhm,
it's not. I I think we'd keep it because it's a good place to be. People kind of want new things quickly,
mhm.
um, but we try not to be. Whenever somebody says bleeding edge, I
Yeah.
kind of cringe. I would
Uh,
like to be leading edge,
I'm
and
an
I would
arch
like
user.
to
I feel the same way.
right. I'd like to not be you be bleeding. Let's
Yeah,
stay
no.
leading, and that's one of the reasons we you do still put out releases rather than having being a rolling release,
Mhm, mhm,
because we want to have kind of a control over all this integration we do of all this change that's coming in. Um, but there's also a thing where um, if someone doesn't do it at
mhm.
scale, it will never be ready.
Right.
And so, with Wayland, I think it wasn't perfect when we put it there, but we tried to make sure that if there was a problem, it was easy for you to fall back to
Right, right.
X, and so we had that option there. And I think that without that wide exposure, it wouldn't have had
Mhm,
the ability to bake and improve. So yeah, we kind of take that for
mhm.
everybody else, and that's okay. Um,
See, the problem is
I
you know the position you're in, and you're a bit too nice with like the how you describe the project. The answer is it was terrible then, but you're not
well,
going to say that.
yeah, some of it might have been, but we try to learn from each of the things. So I
Yeah,
think one
yeah,
of the
yeah.
big things, and this is a kind of a central thing in my talk that I'm pitching, the DevConf talk.
Mhm, mhm.
When we did Fedora like number 15,
Uh-huh.
that was it went to both switching to Systemd and GNOME 3 at the same
Okay.
release, and we lost half of our users. That was just too big change. And
Yeah,
I think,
yeah.
in retrospect, those are both great projects, great
Sure,
technology,
sure.
and were the right things to do. But wow, too much all at once. And
Yeah.
so when we've made other big changes, in both Fedora and like GNOME as an upstream, so like the change in GNOME 40 to way switching to horizontal rather than vertical desktop layout, and
Mhm,
like a pretty big UI change, we put some work into doing UX research with actual human beings rather
mhm.
than like a theory, and getting feedback. And it's not a perfect change for everyone, but that went very smoothly compared, and I think it didn't cause that same distress.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
think we obviously in retrospect we could have made the Systemd change go a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's some excitement for the new, and things are going to break sometimes. One thing you can do, and I know people who do this, we do keep two releases current. This is part of what I was saying about the
Yeah.
release model. So we just came out with Fedora Linux 38,
Mhm.
but Fedora Linux 37 is still supported. We have it's basically 7 months of overlap there.
Right, right.
So you can basically stay one release behind, upgrade every year, and have a much less dramatic
Mhm, mhm.
experience, but still be kind of close to the newer things if that's what you prefer. Um,
That's what I like doing with my hardware. Like I always buy a GPU the generation behind, then all the driver issues and all the like everything else is going to get sorted out by the time I upgrade.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's kind of a similar thing to that. And if that ends up still being too fast for you, there is CentOS Stream, which I think is actually a good option for a lot of people. I
Mhm,
won't go into too much depth about that because that's its whole own talk.
mhm,
Or RHEL. RHEL is available. You can have 16 licenses as an individual to use for whatever you want in production. I think that's a great choice, especially if you're looking at a career,
mhm.
or if you're just a small thing and you want to have a production server. Or there's other distributions that do other things. Those are out there as well. It's all Linux. It's all good.
Mm, mm,
But
mm.
um, I do think we want to make Fedora. People who are using Fedora Linux should have a good, confident experience in it, and it um, should feel safe to use as your daily driver, and you
Mhm.
shouldn't expect it to break on you. I think
Right.
that's fair.
Mhm, mhm.
And we should expect that big changes are handled in a way that makes them that at least you have a way to adjust things to fall back, even if there is something that is new.
Well,
Uh,
speaking of big changes, I know there's been some like discussions about possibly GTK 5 being like it's still a while away, but like GTK 5 being Wayland only. And when if that happens, that means Gnome at that point is going to be Wayland only. This is probably a 5 or so plus
Yeah.
years into the future, but I feel like that is going to be a really difficult transition because Wayland is eventually going to happen. Like this is
Yeah.
just the direction we're going, but it's going to be another one of those System D sort of changes where there's going to be
Uh,
a bit of resistance, but I
uh,
don't know
yeah.
what you think
I
about it.
think I think if it's 5 years, if you put it at 5 years in the future, I don't think there'll be. I don't think anybody will notice.
Mhm.
Honestly, I used to, when we made that change, I used to try Wayland every new release, and then 3 days later, I'd be back on X. And somewhere along the line, and I don't know when, I stopped doing that, and now
Mhm.
I've just, oh yeah, I guess I'm a Wayland user now. Because a
Mhm.
lot of that work has been done.
Mhm.
And right now, there are maybe some like remote network use cases and
Yeah,
things
for sure.
where people use X, but X is actually not very good for that because it was designed to be used on a university network with no security and all these different right and not the way people want to use it.
Yeah, one of the comments
So
I usually get comments
yeah,
about like network transparency every time I bring up Wayland,
yeah.
but I get a lot. While I get a lot of people saying it, I don't know how many people that's actually a use case for. Like, especially in the X sort of format of doing it.
Right, yeah. It's actually, unless you have a very high speed link between your systems, it's a very chatty protocol and
Mhm.
not great. So you're better off using, I don't know if the no machine thing is still around, but
Mhm.
also, just the VNC kind of approach to things is actually better. And I think that's probably what's going to happen with. I mean, there's work on things like that
Mhm.
for Wayland.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's just called
I don't know the details,
VVNC.
but
I want to say.
yeah, but I honestly believe that if it's 5 years from now, no one will notice, or if it, you, I think even 3 years from now, it'll be so smooth there won't be a people will be whatever. Now, yeah, now if it's like 1 year from now, everybody's there,
Yeah.
then some people will be grumpy. But even then, I don't think it is that kind of gigantic system D kind of change.
Mhm.
Um,
More like a pipewire sort of change where it's
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And hopefully a more smoothed out pipewire than the first couple releases.
it was a bit of a
Um,
rough, wasn't it?
yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
I sort of
but
migrated fairly early on as well, and a couple of those updates that came, especially being on Arch, a couple of those updates came through. I was like, today we're going back to Pulse Audio for a little bit.
yeah, I didn't have much needing to go back, but I did have a lot of like restarting my audio. Oh, yep,
Well,
just gonna have a little script running in the background, restarting my audio every 5 minutes, just in case I. Yeah, but
my main concern was because of the video production stuff. I had some issues with OBS early
yeah,
on. That was my
yeah.
main concern because I would have sometimes like audio tracks would like the different audio sources would merge together. Like my mic and my desktop audio would just be the same thing, and I didn't know why.
Interesting.
It's
What
all
I need to
ironed
figure.
out now.
I have 3 monitors here,
Yeah, I do as well.
and one of them has speakers on it, which I
Mhm,
sometimes use when I'm tired of my headphones.
mhm, mhm.
But the other two do not. But they're both HDMI, things, so they show up on my audio list, and I just need to figure out how to tell it. Never show me that, and I do not understand the syntax. I
Uh,
need to
what
figure
does Fedora use as its what do you call it? The
the it's wire plumber.
yeah, you can. There's some Lua script you can do for that.
Uh, yeah, there is, but wow, I
Look
can't
at the
figure it
Arch
out.
wiki. The Arch
I
wiki
know.
is
Oh, the
great.
Arch Wiki is so good. I mean, it's Arch Wiki is amazing. I need to find somebody to Arch and just be like, could we also just use your wiki officially? It's the detail there, and a lot of that comes out of like it's not something that can be easily replicated
Mhm,
because it's not that it's a wiki, it's that there are people who are it it it's the same thing that could be irritating about Wikipedia
mhm, mhm.
when it doesn't go what you want. But there are people who are very strict about how this is how the wiki will work.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is what it's for. This is what things will look like, and they curate it and keep it there. And that's the energy that makes. In a lot of ways, I think Arch is a documentation project where there happens to be a distribution that you can run.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right? At least I that might not be completely fair, and I'm probably being unfair to people working on the other the bits. But that documentation, that wiki is so amazing. Yeah, I
I think one that
definitely
doesn't
look
get
at
as
it for
much
things.
credit is the Gentoo wiki is also really good. The people usually, when they talk about the wikis in Linux, usually the Arch
Yeah.
wiki is the one that gets the main focus, but Gentoo's wiki for a lot of things is really, really in depth.
I will maybe add some Gentoo search bookmarks then too.
A lot of the
But
stuff, a lot of it is obviously going to be, especially the install section, very Gentoo-y. Like, here are the compile stuff that,
yeah,
yeah. But like for the configuration stuff, for sure, it works quite well as
but
well.
I don't know. If you know the people who work on the Arch Wiki as a project, or if anybody's listening, if you want to be, hey, let's collaborate with Fedora and just add if you're on Fedora Linux section to some of those pages, I'd love that. I mean, why duplicate? It's
I have heard some people suggest maybe like it would be cool if the Arch wiki was more of just like a general Linux wiki, because for a lot of things it really is. Like take out the Arch install guide, and for a lot of the stuff on there, it's just the same everywhere.
yeah, exactly. And again, why duplicate? We could
Yeah, for
try and
sure.
recreate the thing, but that would be silly. We could make something that tries to scrape it. I
Mhm.
assume it's under an open license. Uh,
Uh, I don't.
I
Yeah, I don't know what it's
is it,
under, but I would imagine so.
let's better.
If
We gotta
it's
look right
not
now.
someone, surely.
Come on, Arch Wiki people.
Yeah,
GNU free documentation
yeah.
license.
There we go.
Sure. We use the CC by SA 4.0, but whatever. That's a uh,
So, on the topic of not duplicating effort, recently, Red Hat is decided to stop maintaining the LibreOffice RPM, and there is this sort of also there was that article from George Castro about this change in the distribution model on Linux. There is a lot of push right now to Flatpak. There's also, Canonical's doing their thing with snaps as well, but there's a lot of this push to Flatpaks right now, and what do you? Well,
yeah.
one of the main points I wanted to get your opinion on was um George. Actually, I'll see if I can find the exact line because it was something like distros need to stop pretending that repackaging Office Suite adds any value or something along those lines. Was uh Office Suite. Let's find the exact line. I'll quote him correctly because if I don't, he might get in my DMs. Um, Let's see. Where is it? Office. Here we go. People don't want to hear this, so I'll just say it. Distributions can no longer afford to pretend that they add value by repackaging Office suites. The real value is in the hard stuff. We need a well-maintained kernel, graphical stack, desktop, and associated core tools.
Yeah, so I was saying before we started, I think that there's some of these things I see all these different opinions, and I kind of agree with all of them in different ways to some
Mhm,
amount. I definitely come from this distro packaging background for many years, so
mhm,
I think there's actually some of the hard work that's been done in the process of packaging
mhm,
that gets overlooked, and it isn't necessarily in the packages themselves, but one of the things we take for granted, ARM systems everywhere, running, in the cloud, and
mhm,
ARM
mhm,
notebooks, the new Mac coming out. Like, oh yeah, of course, it's Linux. Stuff will just run on ARM, right? That wasn't necessarily true. In fact, even like when we went to x86-64,
mhm, mhm,
like um, not everything was actually embarrassingly so much code was not 64-bit clean. It just wouldn't work right.
mhm,
And so by doing that in the distro, where we worked to convert everything we could. We
mhm,
touched a lot of software. We, including improving the compilers and finding all these things in the software that made that software work. Cross distribution. Whereas the developers, usually have a much smaller scope, and they
mhm.
may even have all their own targets. There may be some developers who are like, yeah, I care about x86-64 and I love RISC-V, or I've got a power
I was
PC,
gonna mention
like right,
PowerPC.
yeah, you've got that, right? Like that's like you've got, but trying to be like, we're going to run on all these architectures,
Mhm,
like that's a big project and hard work, and it really adds a lot of value. People are going to expect, when they run their Apple M1 system with Fedora Linux,
Mhm.
that LibreOffice has the ARM build that they need, and so that's like the work we did as a distro to make sure that worked, and not just us, but Debian, other projects that do that at that distro level. That's actually really huge, and we try to, when we make fixes and improvements, we make sure those go back up to the project. We try not to. That shouldn't just be a Fedora thing, and some of that stuff doesn't, like, we could do that kind of thing outside of packaging, but it kind of loses its center. So putting
Right.
it in the package makes a way to do it and a flow there. And so if we have all the different distros packaging there, one of the things I was thinking about, so in Fedora, we talked about the CPU architecture baseline, and that basically is, as Intel and AMD make new processors, they keep adding new features, and if you compile your code for the newer feature set, it can be, especially in some cases, a lot faster, but it won't run on the older hardware.
Right.
And so this is actually, a RHEL is moving to a newer baseline, but there's an irony, because Fedora is fast moving, we can't, because it means if we only, our releases are supported for 13 months. So somebody with 5-year-old hardware might find that that stops working. Whereas if they're using enterprise operating system, they can keep running whatever RHEL version on it until they are done paying exorbitant amounts or whatever for this long life cycle, right? So we've decided we're holding it at this baseline, but there's nothing like that's that what we do for our package set, and that's consistent. But there's nothing that says people who are building their things to go on FlatHub have to do that. So
Right.
somebody might decide, I'm building a graphics processing app of doing photography raw conversion. I need this higher baseline. The performance is so worth it. They provide that, and then people find out that they're 2-year-old systems that it mysteriously doesn't work. Right? Like, because so that kind of consistency, and it is deep hard work across all of these things that people do, and there are a bunch of other things that Flatpak makes better, because it also used to be that developers would have interesting opinions about where configuration files go, and all of these things, and and doing something like Silverblue means that those have to be consistent. They need to go in your home directory in the right place. They need doing Flatpaks, they need to be consistent. But people used to be like, our config files go in a new top level directory they've made up, and so
Yeah.
just distributions
SSH.
spent a lot of time, like, saying, okay, look, we're putting this in a consistent framework here. And so um, you know there's something to be said for letting developers experiment, and shoving that stuff into a container. Fine, you can do whatever mess you want inside your container, developers. That's a nice way to draw a line and let people have flexibility, but also make the whole system consistent. But there are some things that kind of go outside of that still, and without there's something to this project of integrating everything together that we do in the distros that has some value. Um, Now, I think that with some of the bigger projects, like LibreOffice, Firefox, those kind of things, we can work together, and people are going to be understanding about these things. But just with the wild west of all of the packages, it's hard
Right.
to figure out how to do that. And I think, I don't know, one of the posts, so I saw recently, which it was kind of muckraking, and I won't point to it, but it had it said, FlatHub is a distribution, and in some ways, therefore, a distribution competitor. And I think that's really true. And it's interesting because it's been a distribution that's chosen to be very free with how people do things. Like, there's very little, things about supply chain security, supply chain management is a big thing you hear a lot about. With FlatHub, a lot of that stuff is just like, yeah, whatever, don't get in the way of the developer building their thing. And so, like, that we have all that stuff in our distro model, where we kind of try and track that. When you build something in the Fedora project, it's built from something that's checked into our Git repo. It's built. You don't have network access while it's building, so you can't pull down all your dependencies from whatever thing. And so there's a consistency and traceability that you don't necessarily have with people doing whatever they want with Flatpaks. That doesn't mean things can't be better. But I think that I don't know. We've got a distros and FlatHub as a distro or as
Mhm.
a meta distro or something, have a conversation to have about what is important for those things for users,
Mhm. Mhm.
because um, yeah, it's kind of easy to set up a developers versus distros thing, and both developers are like, distros are getting in the way of our relationship with our users, and distros are like, yeah, but we're distros are usually built by people who are users or are sysadmins, and um, developers don't always have the best interests of users in
Mhm.
mind, or the same idea about that. And I don't mean it in a malicious way, just that developers can have their own mindset about what they're doing.
Mhm.
And I some of this may be with data collection and whatever other things. And one of the other points that people who are criticizing Flatpak, I think, rightfully make, is the sandboxing is not very strong by
Mhm.
default, and it is sandboxing that is voluntarily defined by the developer.
Yeah, if you just like,
And
hey, access the entire file system, like that's an
yeah,
option.
yeah, right. Yeah, and basically the developer says, okay, here's how my app needs to be constrained to be
Mhm.
secure, which is fine unless um, people don't want to do that.
Right.
And I think as this all gets more popular, there's going to be people who actually are bad actors who are actually trying
Mhm.
to do
Mhm.
malicious things. And so I think that FlatHub, they're adding a thing where it verifies that the thing is from
Yeah,
who it
that's
says it's
that's being
from,
released
which
now.
is one step. But I think there needs to be, and they've got some other things, but I think there needs to be kind of an increasing series of verification
Mhm.
about those things. And one of the ways that I've been arguing that we could do this is we can make Flatpaks from what we do in Fedora. And right now we've got a
The
system that
Fedora Flatpak
is
repo.
right, and right now that is a Rube Goldberg machine, which involves making RPM packages, and it's honestly it's crazy. But there are reasons that it was done that way, which I will not apologize for. But it's not beautiful.
Mhm.
But I mean, we could also go from source to Flatpak and do some of those kind of things, and still provide work in the way that we do as a distro.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's the right thing to do. I'm willing to be argued out of it. But I think that we need to have the same kind of, wherever it comes from,
Mhm.
reproducible builds, and verifiability, traceability, supply chain things. When there is a CVE in some dependency in a thing that's packaged in Fedora Linux, like,
Mhm.
we trace that, and we can know. And that introspection isn't all there for the dependencies of things in Flatpak, and
Mhm.
with the sandboxing not being so tight, that could be a problem. Um, I don't think that it's wrong to have it the way it is, because this is the way Android worked too. Like the
Mhm.
early Android releases, like there was not very much security, and then they've made that tighter and tighter. And so I think that's probably what needs to happen with Flatpak, and the same kind of thing where now Flatpak, or sorry, Flatpak Android apps ask you for permissions as they're needed, and
Mhm.
also if you haven't used them for a while, like
You'll
they
remove
go
them.
away,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's that Flatpak and FlatHub, need that kind of thing as part of it,
Mhm.
as it goes forward. And I think it'll get there, but we sh- I think people are using that as like a gotcha, and I don't think it's a gotcha, but I
What do you
think it's a
mean
valid
there?
criticism. Oh, like, oh, Flatpak's crap. It doesn't have security.
Oh,
Look at
right.
these
Okay. Yeah.
flaws,
Okay.
right? Yeah. I think it's somebody in the Debian project said a long time ago that working on a distro is requires you to be able to accept tepid tepid progress for the somewhat better. And
Mhm.
I think it's hard for a lot of people. That's to accept that this is not now the best thing.
Right.
This is
Right.
just, we're moving a little step very
Mhm. Mhm.
slowly, and you make those little steps over time, and you get somewhere much more effectively than if you try to drop that thing in. Especially going back to the whole system D thing. Sure,
You're scarred by that, aren't you?
oh yeah, absolutely. No, and I love system D. It's great,
Mhm.
but like, um, there's some hubris, right? That first version is not that you think is so great, maybe not as great as it actually could be with some the battle scars of experience. So where am I going with this? Yes, right. Like people should be more accepting of small changes that are like, okay, that's not everything, but it's getting us there.
Right,
And
right.
sometimes you need to make some leaps, but incremental change can be very powerful.
Yeah, if you you improve upon something 1% every day,
Right?
eventually
Yeah.
massive
Yeah.
improvement. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Compound interest. It's
Yeah, exactly. So on the topic of Flatpaks and all this, there's the immutable. Would you call them spins? How do you describe them in the project?
Yeah. Let's say spins.
Okay, okay.
We don't have a term. Naming things is hard,
It's
and
just
it's also
immutable
kind of got.
desktops on here. That's all
It's
it
kind of
says.
gotten out of control with all the different fun names people like Silver Blue, and then we had Kino White, and then Sarika, and then so I don't, we're gonna have to rein that in, but
Yeah,
people are having fun with it for now.
I did talk about this in a recent video.
Yeah.
There's Onyx and yeah.
Yeah. Part of naming, it's one of the famously hard
Yeah.
problems. But immutable is also not really right for
No.
what Silverblue is, so I don't like that either. And Colin, who's the author of OS Tree, he really hates it.
I'm seeing a lot more people
So
use like image based now, which seems like a much
yeah,
better term.
but the thing is, like, that's not what OS Tree is. It's different from the image-based ones.
Yeah.
It's not an image-based at all. So like image-based, like that's a whole different thing. Like that's actually like Leonard now at Microsoft's working on image-based. Like that's like they're seriously image-based. Like that's the whole thing, right? Like there's different approaches that are image-based. So this is something different as well. But it's sort of in the same family of problem solving. I don't know.
It's definitely a better term than immutable, because like the problem with immutable is I've oh my god, my comments every time I talk about immutable desktops. Every time someone's like, "Oh, it's immutable, therefore nothing changes." Like this is the problem with immutable. Like
Yeah,
that, it's
right.
such a bad term. Like, it has so much meaning attached to it.
So before Red Hat bought CoreOS, the company, we had this thing called Project Atomic, which was where all this is done in. And I am trying to convince the people at Red Hat who are the holders still of the Atomic name that wouldn't it be nice if we'd just be able to use that? But I've got to do some more sweet talking to get to there, because I think Atomic is a fine thing describes what kind of how it works. The updates are atomic in a technical way, and also it's a really cool logo.
Yeah, we can just go like full circle with Silverblue. Just in. So we started at Fedora Atomic Workstation. Now we can go Fedora Atomic Gnome, Fedora Atomic KDE. Like this is. It's like it's straight to the point. I understood why Silverblue came about as a name. Like it's a much. Fedora Atomic Workstation is like it's very much Fedora. People who don't like Fedora are gonna have a weird opinion of it. But Silverblue is like this new thing.
Yeah, and there's something to that. Although I would like to, we want to get Fedora in there to make sure people know that we can.
But like it definitely helped early on. But now that like the immutable desktop has this appeal to it, I don't think it's needed as much.
Yeah, and I think it kind of helped doing that helped break the idea that Fedora could only do things one way.
Right.
And so once people understand that, we don't actually need the forcing function quite so much for it. But yeah, kind of going back to this whole thing, I'm going to interpret the question I think you were asking, which was,
go ahead.
are we going there? And so this is part of the strategy proposal. I talked about setting strategy, and one of the things, that's a direction we could go in. But part of the problem is Fedora Workstation in our traditional model, it works pretty well. So it's again hard to make big commitment to it. And I think we have to make a declaration, and that's what we plan to do. Say, this is our strategy. We are going towards this approach for our systems. This is going to be the main way Fedora will be consumed, possibly ending the naming problem, because it will just be like that's how Fedora Linux systems are. And I don't know what the target date is for that. There are definitely some problems to solve, but I think that's the direction. It's the direction everybody's going. I think it's the direction we'll go there as well. And that also helps with the the problem with sometimes things are broken. You know, with this, you can roll back and go back to an earlier version. And OS Tree has a really neat thing where you can actually bisect, which
Mm-hmm.
is basically if this worked last week, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work now. So you can say, okay, let's go back to 3 days ago. Does it work? Okay, and then just by dividing in half, do that binary search, and
Mm-hmm.
very quickly find here's the change that caused the problem. And
Mm.
then the person, we can report it to that particular package, and then they can they can find the bug. So it actually really makes finding what caused an issue much easier as well.
Mm-hmm.
I can't promise there'll never be issues, but I think that's going to be really powerful as well.
For your personal daily driving system, what are you actually running? Is it just like mainline Fedora workstation or?
Yeah, this is mainline Fedora workstation here and on my other desktop.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm planning to reinstall with Silverblue on my laptop
Mm-hmm.
after I give my talk at the next conference.
Mm-hmm.
I've played with it a few times before, but I've never kept it on a system. And as I'm saying, we need to commit. It's time for me to commit as well, and then I will probably also move these other systems as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's definitely I'm sort of intrigued by it, especially with tools like DistroBox being available now, where it's made that whole like it's made that sort of bridging the gap, because the problem with a purely immutable system is you got your Flatpaks, and the Flatpaks will address most things, but sometimes there are things that like can't be done in the Flatpaks.
Yeah. So and we have Toolbox, which
Toolbox as
is
well, yeah.
yeah, right. And I don't know. I'm not involved in directly in this. I wonder if maybe we should just merge in with DistroBox and go with that. We would like to encourage people to use Fedora for
Mhm,
their thing there, but whatever. We should also go with what's more powerful, what people are using. But I would actually
You can
like it
certainly
so
like
that
these DMs are open. You can certainly have a like discussion, see
yeah,
what's gonna go on, like
yeah,
try and work something out.
yeah. I there was something that one of the GNOME designers who works on Fedora did
Mhm.
a while ago, where it was actually a terminal replacement that was aware of the environment, and so you
Yeah,
actually had
yeah.
terminal UI that understood what you were in, and I really think I think that's something that would be worth working on.
Similar to what
Um,
Windows does with WSL.
Possibly, I'm not sure.
I,
I haven't run Windows for
okay, well
years, so
on Windows with their new terminal, like if you open up like an Ubuntu environment, it has like a little Ubuntu logo being like you're in Ubuntu. You've got like PowerShell, it tells you like you're in PowerShell.
yeah, but not just that, but being able to switch environments from menus and actually
Right,
have
right, right.
GUI
Okay.
control over what's going on as well. But then I would also, as the next step of that, the default when you open up a terminal window should be inside a toolbox environment rather than on the host system.
Mm-hmm,
Going
mm-hmm.
to the host system should be oh yes, actually want to mess with that level of thing.
Right, right.
And I think that'll kind of help the whole thing work together.
Mm-hmm,
One of the big unsolved problems is how to make things like VS Code and IDEs that don't run inside the terminal
mm-hmm,
work nicely with that kind of environment. I think we obviously need to get that solved nicely in
mm-hmm.
order to really make this the mainstream solution.
Mm.
Um, but I think we'll get there. So,
I'm sure, like something we worked out. I know that with DistroBox at least, like VS Code doesn't seem to have any issue with it. There was people have been running like really stupid things with it as well. Like, hey, I'm gonna run my entire desktop environment in DistroBox. Like, hey, what? It works. Don't do that.
Right, yeah. So in that you're like installing GUI applications into that and running them there. We'd
Yeah,
like
yeah,
to be
yeah.
able to install something as a Flatpak and then have it interact with the environment that's
Yeah.
your and there's ways to do that, but
Mm-mm. It's
it
not
doesn't.
as convenient. Yeah.
And it should be made not just as convenient, but
Mhm.
you know, I'm trying to find a nicer way to say it than idiot proof, because there's always you can't like
You
it
already
should
said it
just
now.
right. I know, too late. No, it's that's not even really the right concept. It should just be like that's what happens. You don't have to do anything to
Right,
do
right,
it.
right.
It's beyond obvious. It's just the way,
Mm-hmm.
rather than something you kind of have to act. Oh, I'm in weird quirky mode to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, what right now do you see as the biggest limitations of Fedora that you would like to see addressed?
Um,
I'll put you on the spot here.
yeah, no, I'm just trying to. I think we have a hard time finding how to put people who show up interested in doing something into the right places.
Mm-hmm.
So we often have people like, "Hi, I'm," especially actually, honestly, with discourse there and the matrix for our chat. We have people showing up who are interested,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just not enough people who are prepared to absorb someone new coming on board. And
Right.
that onboarding someone can be a lot of work. And so one of the things, again, in the strategy we're focusing on is a mentorship, and having that, and onboarding is kind of a key part of that. So when somebody shows up and is interested, have not just a here's a list of tickets you could get to,
Mm-hmm.
which works okay for some people, but Fedora is so big that it's so overwhelming, and we've got so much history and so on, that like that approach, uh, it filters people out. You only get people who have a certain mindset and are able to dig through that, which
Mm-hmm.
amazing. But there's a lot of people that we could really, be valuable members of the project, have a lot to contribute, get a lot back themselves, who we don't know kind of how to get that hook.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a join sig that basically kind of does a hand-holding approach for people, but that I think we need to scale that up, and also that's very much a here's the intro level, and there's not quite the ongoing support that people
Right.
might need to get involved. So I think that's really a thing that I think we could do better as a project, and if we can do that, then we can do everything else better. This
Mm-hmm.
is why, of the strategy, the guiding principle of what we're trying to do in 5 years is double the number of contributors who are active, because um, I think that's a metric that is, it shows the health of the project,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know where technology is going to be in 5 years. It's going to
Sure.
be somewhere that neither of us have predicted, and so having people who are there and involved like that, I know is going to be valuable, no matter if now all of our code is written by AI, and um, I don't know,
Someone
we're all
rewrote the
just
Linux kernel in Rust.
yeah, they use ChatGPT to
Yeah,
rewrite
exactly.
it in Rust, obviously, right? They wouldn't do it themselves. What is this, 2022? Uh, yeah, so yeah, I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
having
Mm-hmm.
more people involved in whatever capacity, and that is a lot, it's not just coding, it's
Mm-hmm.
documentation, but also I talking to people, helping run meetings, doing design, answering questions, welcoming people into the project, coming to Fedora Social Hour and just chatting about things. All of that stuff is really actually important project contributions. Um, so more of all that.
You touched on something very important there, documentation. I think a lot of people, when they think of like a software project or a distro project, that you have to be a developer to get involved in some way. But there is a lot more, like, if you have, I don't know, maybe you're bilingual, you have some ability to do translation, you have, like, there's more than just that. Like, what are ways that, obviously those are two
Yeah.
main ways, like, what are other ways people can get involved
Yeah,
with the
so I think actually
project?
translation, I want to highlight that a little bit, because I think that's something really interesting and special
Mm,
about open source projects. Also, interestingly, what AI is bringing to all of this.
mm-hmm.
But a commercial project is going to be limited in what languages they care about. And
Right.
there are thousands of languages in the world, and some of them are spoken by only a few people in a
Mm-hmm,
small
mm-hmm,
community. But like that small community can have, you know, Fedora Linux
mm-hmm,
and all this stuff translated for their language. You can have it local to you,
mm-hmm,
and that's really powerful and important. It doesn't matter if like that translation is commercially viable or mandated by law somewhere or whatever. Like you
mm-hmm,
can have that. So it's part of this. Like this belongs to you, OS. So I think that's a really important thing that I definitely would like to call out.
mm-hmm.
Um, I think Yeah, there are a lot of other ways. We have a great design team in
Mhm.
Fedora. The desktop wallpapers every time are done with the community process, and I think we've got great fun wallpapers that um,
It's
I really
Fedora
love. And
38
that's that.
wallpaper.
Yeah, so
Have a
that's
look.
that's done in the open, and our design team is really great. But one of the easiest things to do, well, wait, let me get another one. QA or
Mhm.
quality work. I'm not gonna say quality assurance. Like just when
100% certain it's quality. That.
yeah, during the releases, as we go through, it's like going through and the list of tests and checking off checks.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's can be very satisfying to like, okay, look at all this. I'm getting towards 100% completion on our matrix. That's one thing, but also like as new package updates come out, like those
Mhm.
are constantly coming, and there are regressions. Like test them, find the regressions, comment,
Mhm.
and or that helps. But then the thing I was going to say, ask.fedoraproject.org, which is
Mhm.
now a subsession of the discussion forum, like go there, look at people's questions, provide what you know. You don't need to be an expert to know something. And even if you don't know the answer,
Mhm.
you can look at people's questions and be like, okay, I know that they didn't say what graphics card they're using, and they're
Mhm.
talking about a graphics problem. So you
Right.
can say something like, hey, so and so, welcome. Hey, could you provide these details so we can provide a better answer? Like just being friendly like that,
Mhm.
and then you'll help build some expertise.
Mhm.
Um, at the ISP that I helped start, like I did telephone tech frontline tech support, and I did that also at my university job, actually helping direct people. And there's no way to learn more faster than trying to help people with their problems. Like it's so good.
Yep.
So that's not just like a way you can help. Like you will learn a lot doing that. So I really recommend that as a way to get involved as well.
Mm. I think it's a good answer. Um, well, on the topic of improving things, someone did ask me about working with desktop environments on accessibility, because that's a really big focus of it for a lot of people. Like, a lot of people desperately need that, and like there are issues with Wayland right now where a lot of the accessibility tooling people were using in the past may not be working or as consistent as it was. Like, what sort of work does Fedora do
Yeah.
with the desktops on improving that?
Yeah. So I mean, excuse me. I mean,
Water time.
I have been talking for a long time, and I don't have tea, despite the name. Um, so my voice is starting to go. We might have to call this soon. But this is also one of the things where it actually came out really early as a focus in our strategy. We want to work on this,
Mhm.
um, and I think broken it down into like three different things.
Mhm.
Um, so one of those things is accessibility of the OS
Mhm.
itself,
Mhm.
and I'm going to put that in a little box for a second, and then come back to that. We also have accessibility of our own tooling and of our websites and things like that.
Right.
We need to
Right.
make sure that someone can contribute to the project, despite whatever abilities they have. They're not limited because we um, didn't have the accommodations we should. So we work on that kind of thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Other things like the desktop itself, um, you know, we are an integrator, so like those changes are going to happen in GNOME, and we'll work with GNOME.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think we can probably help the best by providing user feedback
Mhm.
and information that channel back into the upstream projects to GNOME, KDE, XFCE, Sway, whoever else wants to hear from us.
Mhm.
Um, but also, the desktop team at Red Hat, which does a lot of work on Fedora, has actually hired somebody to work on this in GNOME in particular,
Mhm.
which I think will have a pretty big impact. And so we want to make sure that we're showcasing those and leading with those features
Mhm.
in Fedora Linux, because that is really that. Yeah, I said that this should be an operating system for everybody, and that absolutely should include everybody.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, uh,
Oh, I thought you
yeah.
didn't want to say that.
No,
I didn't want to cut you off.
no, sorry. A Firefox decided that a meeting in a half hour or needed to be notified and stole my window from me and suddenly vanished. That was the gas. But I was also going to say, as I'm getting up towards 50,
Mhm.
amazing. And I can my eyes aren't what they used to be,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so I am reminded of yeah. ability is a temporary state, right?
Mhm.
Everybody needs accommodations in some way, and our lives change, and like
Mhm.
we should putting this in a central place. It's not a it's not a special case, it's the main case. And there are so many ways in which accommodations benefit everybody as well. That's one of the things. Going to Europe from the United States, or in US, we have a very strong disability act, and so public buildings have ramps, all of these things there, and going and realizing like, oh wow, people with wheelchairs can't get in this building. Sorry, this is just a building you can't have.
Right.
Or and then also but that also means people with strollers can't get in there, or it's harder to
Right.
bring your packages in, or all these things. Like there's benefits that are from these things that uh, continue on to other things, and I think we'll see
Mhm.
that in the distro as well.
Mm. Well, I've got a couple other questions on here that I
Yeah.
definitely want to address.
Let's do them before my voice goes. I'll see if we can rapid fire.
I, so a while back, for like a year or I didn't was whenever it was, a bunch of YouTubers started to be like, Fedora is this great distro that everybody should be running. A bunch of people started swapping to it, and it's sort of started being described as like the new Ubuntu by some people. Like, what did it feel like having that sudden? Obviously, Fedora was already a massive distro at that point, but suddenly getting this extra attention and these new eyes onto the project that may not have
Oh,
been interested before.
I'm pretty happy about that. I've got to say, I think it was nice because we didn't do a marketing campaign and tell everybody to say that. It was
Mhm.
just kind of a grassroots thing where people had noticed. I do kind of think maybe that silver blue thing got people's attention a little bit,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
also, honestly, some of the work on audio, on Pipewire, and all those things, even though I feel your pain, but
It's
like,
good now.
we had there was a funny effect of this where the target wasn't that we would make life easier and better for streamers and broadcasters, but if you do, they're going to talk about it. So
Mm.
that effect certainly helped a little bit. But no, I really do think we've just been kind of quietly making things better and better. And yeah, you're right. There were some times where it was kind of rough running the distro, and we've really worked hard on making upgrades easy, to make things run smoothly, to not be bleeding edge, and
Mhm,
people
mhm,
started noticing that, and I think um, that's what happened. And I think people also noticed, hey, this really is, despite the Red Hat link, really is a community distro that is doing real important things. Um, so yeah, it's definitely felt very validating to hear that. Of
mhm.
course, then it starts being you get the pushback, because whenever that's somebody's got to be the naysayer. You got the one person on Rotten Tomatoes who doesn't like the Pixar movie. Wow, they got to get their
Mm.
so there's some of that, and it also means you got to keep executing,
Mhm,
and it's also one of those things about um incremental change is somewhat better. We
mhm.
don't always have something exciting every release, and so for that enthusiast thing, just like in the mainstream press, if we don't have something splashy every release, then we start getting back to being the has-beens again.
Mm.
So that is something. Speaking of things we could use contributions to, there's a lot of good things are going on and things we could talk about. We could use help marketing it. That's an area we don't get any funding from Red Hat for. Red Hat's funding goes into the products.
Right.
That's fine. But we have stories to tell, and it would be nice for each release, everything to come with those stories that we can talk about to
Mhm,
people like you, and enthusiasts, and mainstream journalists, so that they have that, to kind of keep that story of,
right,
yeah, this
right.
is there. And I want to make sure we don't lose that.
No, that definitely makes sense. Keep the candle burning. Keep people paying at least a little bit of attention to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Hopefully in a good way. I want to say that good news is good news, not
mhm.
yeah.
So one other thing was, um, I don't know how much you've looked into George Castro's project Universal Blue, which takes what Fedora is doing upstream and then it's Silver Blue with batteries included. Do you have any thoughts on that
Yeah,
project
yeah.
or?
I talked with him a little bit about it. I think it's really exciting, and it's something that's kind of in line with our mission.
Mhm,
I think whenever possible, I would love people to come and do things in the project. I would like you to make, a Fedora variant or spin.
Hmm.
If you have a new crazy desktop idea, like why reinvent packaging and all the distros and try to build your own marketing team and docs. And I mean, you can, fine, it's open source, but
Hmm.
we've got that stuff. Come work with us and we can make it a really cool place to have a showcase for your thing.
Hmm.
But there are other things that are sort of outside of project decisions. For example, like that architecture, baseline architecture thing. Like, what if you do want to compile everything for the newest?
Right, right.
I mean, if you've got resources you want to bring to the project to help us do that, um, awesome. Thank you, Intel, if you're listening. Please, we'd love to do Clear Linux as part of Fedora. But I now sidetracked myself. Not everything can be done that way, and I think that's a lot of what's going on in Universal Blue. It kind of gives them freedom to do things another way, and this is actually kind of part of Fedora's own mission. We want
Hmm.
to enable people to make their own solutions based on Fedora, and hopefully we want to have a good relationship. So like RHEL as a downstream where we that feeds back resources into the project and people working on it, and things we would like to have things coming back from Universal Blue, and they're really interested in working that way as well because it makes less work for them. The more things
Hmm.
that are further upstream, the better. Yeah, same. Amazon Linux. Those downstreams are an important success metric, really, as well. So I'm glad, actually, really glad to see that too, and
Hmm.
I'd love to see more of that.
Mm. Well, okay, another one. So, I- obviously, the main focus of Fedora isn't being like this is a gaming distro, but it's a distro that everybody. Like, if you're running Fedora, you're running Fedora. Like you, if you're involved, if you like doing gaming, you're probably going to game on your system. What sort of focus, if any, does Fedora have in helping accommodate that sort of use case?
Yeah, so I mean, we have people interested in that. We have a gaming SIG, special interest group, that
Hmm.
kind of works for that. And we have a lot of people on the workstation team and on their desktops who know exactly what you said. Like gaming is a fundamental thing. In our interviews with people, like there's like, what keeps you on Windows? Well, I got to reboot for my games, or I got to have a Windows system for my gaming, right? And so improving that has definitely been something that's just kind of this is one of those sure, we want to maybe focus on developers, but developers play games kind of
Hmm.
thing. So
Hmm.
there's some general interest there. Um, I don't like, there's not a lot of resources to devote to some of the fundamental
Right,
work,
right.
but I think we may end up benefiting from things like GPU computing. That is basically the whole AI all runs on graphics cards kind of
Hmm.
thing, where NVIDIA has finally been convinced that they need to do something different with their driver, and NVIDIA is by far, like I referred to Ask Fedora before. I don't know, I I may be biased, but I would just guess off the top of my head that half of the problems there are something that was with NVIDIA, right? And there's very little we can do about it
Hmm.
because it's like, I mean, even if we tried to make it as slick as possible, but like it's their driver and their code, and
Hmm.
we can't fix it. We can't do anything, and we could hold back kernel updates
Hmm.
so that they match, but like that's holding back a whole lot of other things, including security improvements. And um, you know, I I don't feel like we should hold the whole thing hostage to the one person who doesn't want to play nice with the upstream. So
Hmm.
finally, anyways, the GPU stuff has basically made enough big companies tell NVIDIA, your way of doing this is
Hmm.
not working for us. We need this to be open source, like AMD has for a while, and Intel. And I have to say, like, this is not a software purity thing about open source is the only way.
Hmm.
In
Hmm.
fact, from that point of view, it's not that great because uh, AMD and Intel require a pretty big firmware that doesn't. It's not. It's running. It's in the GPU. This is kind of our distinction in Fedora space to draw a line on.
Hmm.
Where's our hard line on freedom? The firmware that doesn't run on the main system, if it's redistributable, it doesn't need to be open source. And so
Right.
basically, NVIDIA is moving a lot of stuff from the driver to being outside of the driver, and maybe
Hmm.
there may be some other user space optional things. I don't know the whole details of how it's going to be, but so that won't, like, it doesn't advance the cause of like we're building this OS that we all own together in quite as far as I would like, and I would like to see more of that, and hopefully we'll get there. But it does solve our practical problem of every time the kernel updates, NVIDIA breaks everything. And so when that getting there is going to make a big difference from gaming because let's face it, NVIDIA has a very strong um, market
Yeah.
lead, if not, almost monopoly. Even though, they're especially like in laptops, your options are very small, and
Yeah, yeah.
also, whether or not and being able to go pick what you're putting on your hardware is a luxury. And so a lot of people have got the system they have, and it's got the hardware it has, and we'd like to make it work.
For sure.
So I think that hardware enablement's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest thing. Um, I don't know. I am my gaming is more of the like Civ 6 and City Skylines,
Right,
and
right.
very addicted to Stellaris, um, which Stellaris actually is very beautiful for no good reason, because the amount of times that I like zoom in to watch a gigantic space battle going in 3D, like normally I'm just looking at the high level view, and yep, but it has those graphics, but it's not intense, it doesn't need a high frame rate, I'm an easy to please gamer with a lot of these things. So other people with more difficult problems, I think uh there's going to be some work about high monitor refresh rates and those
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
things that's happening, but it's not something that we have a really large investment in, and we're mostly going to work on it's going to be the upstream
It
projects. And
yeah, just bring in
this
whatever
does
changes happen.
this does go to the we're going to try and bring them to you quickly, so that there's that.
Well, last one is a very simple one. What do you maybe it's not a simple one actually.
I can
Uh
make anything complicated.
what do you think is the most exciting thing happening in the Linux ecosystem right now? Like maybe like upcoming tech that's being worked on, maybe I don't just something that yeah, see, I told you. It sounds easy, but it's not actually easy
Yeah.
when you're
No,
doing
I
the
mean,
spot.
and it's one of those things that's easy to get wrong. I
Mm,
do think the Rust thing is interesting. I think,
mhm,
moving to BPF for a lot of things, that's basically technology that went into the kernel for firewalling, but can actually be used to write little programs that do
mhm, mhm,
things. That's actually like an example. The desktop team right now. Um, so you've got input devices like
mhm,
this that are all supposed to be, just they're using a standard USB connection. But it turns out a lot of them are quirky, and they have their own thing. So each of those things ends up needing its own driver,
mhm,
which is a lot of work, and kernel and whatever. So there's a project basically to, instead of doing that, use BPF to detect these quirks and
mhm.
just as a loadable thing, make all these things just devices just work, which will be so much faster, easier, less work. So that's really cool innovation, and I expect we'll see that being used for a lot of crazy things that we've never thought of in the kernel. I think that's exciting. Obviously, the whole immutable thing, yep, whatever we call it, and along with that, there's the supply chain security,
Mhm.
reproducible builds, all of those things. It'll be interesting to see the impact of the large language model AI things. I'm very skeptical about a lot of those things,
Mhm.
but there's um, there's it's also important. There's stuff going on. It can do amazing things. I think the trick where you can try and um, you can make it act like it's a human speaking conversationally, and then get code out of it and stuff. That's kind of fun.
Mhm.
But that's really just very good autocomplete,
Right,
and
right.
it's it there's interesting things that can be done with that, but that's not really the key thing. There are a
Mhm.
lot of other just things that can be done with the models that are amazing, and I think we'll see more and more of that, and that's going to affect Linux just like it's going to affect the rest of the world. um, I don't know what that'll look like, but I it's definitely happening.
Mhm.
This is, again, I'm going to leave out something important in all of this. Yeah, that thing that we're talking about with Flatpak, FlatHub, where distros focus kind of things.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
that's an important conversation, and I think I just, for travel reasons and whatever, and COVID and whatever, I want to get to the Linux Application Summit to kind of talk to people about some of these things, because I really do feel like the value that distros have been providing
Mhm.
is easily overlooked because of just the way we do it,
Right.
um, and you know that value in packaging. It's a two-way conversation because I think we need to find a way to provide that value that isn't necessarily shove everything into 5 different package formats or 100 different package formats or whatever we're doing. But you know what? Maybe it is actually. It's not the worst thing.
It's
And
worked
maybe
so
we can
far.
and maybe we can make that easier and more automated. And I would like there was once upon a time a Red Hat spin-off company called RPath
Mhm.
that had a build system called Connery. That this was a before its time thing, but part of their whole build systems philosophy was that everything would be, instead of having packaging guidelines, there was code, and everything that was different would either would be an exception. So your
Mhm.
packaging would just be what's exceptional. And then ideally the package definition for most packages would be blank.
Huh.
And they would be detected. Okay, this is a Python package. It fits these normal things. Just follow the Python rules and build it.
Mhm.
And I think there were some problems, not perfect, but that idea would make things so much easier if we don't have to uh, have an art of crafting a package.
Mhm, mhm.
So I don't know. I don't know. Something going in that direction would be useful. I don't know. Not that anybody's that I know is particularly working on that,
I've
but
not heard anything
so
either.
yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe we'll just have AI generate all those things and not
Maybe.
worry about it. But uh,
See, when someone says the most exciting thing, usually that means one thing.
uh,
That's fine. No, that's fine. Go on, like it mentioned 7 different things.
there's a lot of
Yeah,
excitement.
for sure.
Uh,
And because someone asked me to do so, we have this as well.
yes. Fun. Yeah, I've got 2 hats here. You know, this is the traditional one. I it won't
Mm-mm.
go on over my headset very
These
well.
headphones are
This is
falling off now. This is a bad idea.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's the traditional Red Hat hat. And then I
Oh.
also, some wonderful folks in the Fedora community. I got promoted to a fancy sounding title of Distinguished Engineer, and they
Mm.
thought that the, Fedora didn't quite rise to distinguished. So I have this as well. It's actually, it's not a costume hat. This is a very nice hat that I will not wear very often because it's not quite my style, but
Mhm, mhm,
I
mhm.
happily display on my shelf up here. Uh,
Yeah,
I do, we picked this name, for the project back before
yeah,
when fedoras were neither cool nor uncool, and then there was a brief period where people thought they were cool, and then there was a
very
long
brief.
time where people thought that they were very cringy. And
Yes.
for like the Linus Tech Tips couldn't help making jokes about the
Uh,
meme, right? And I'm like, you know what? We're older than that meme, and we will outlive that meme. So,
when he first heard about Fedora, like, isn't that sounds like a joke distro? Like,
yeah, right. And that's just a funny point of time of how old that person is. That
mhm,
meme it made an impression on them,
mhm, mhm.
and I think the name is originally from like a Russian play. Right, that's where it comes from originally.
Mhm.
So 1,000 years from now, when we're at Fedora, I don't know, Fedora Linux. I don't know what version we'll be at 1,000 years
How
from
yeah, how
now.
often do you
Five
do you
500.
release?
Yeah, twice a year.
Twice a
So
year.
Fedora, yeah, Fedora
Fedora,
Linux
yeah,
2000,
2000
right?
something. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I did my math the wrong way around. 2000 something, right? People will not remember that meme, but they'll still have.
Well, on that note, I think I can end the show here.
That sounds good because I think I cannot talk anymore, so I am
Yeah,
gonna go.
I do this all the time, and I did a stream earlier today for like 4 hours. I've gotten used to talking for a long time, so I kind of forget like
Oh,
normal people don't do
yeah.
that.
Often I actually do, but I had COVID in January, and
Oh
there's
yeah,
still
okay.
some, residual that. So that's the world as we live in now.
Hmm, hmm.
But,
Well,
I'm glad this was fun. It was worth exhausting my voice on. So thank you
thank
for
you.
having me on.
No, you're always welcome, man. Like this was really fun. I definitely
Yeah.
enjoyed this, and one thing I do want to say is I would like to see more people involved in like in the sort of distro space doing things like this and sort of putting a face behind a project, sort of humanizing the like you see a distro as just a thing, it's a project. It's hard to well, it's easy to forget that there are actually people working behind it, and maybe you don't agree with every single perspective they have, but there are still people that have these things they've thought about. Maybe they've been involved for like 20 years. And I think that's one thing I do like doing with this show, bringing those people here, just letting people see that hey, there is someone actually here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's incredibly important and useful and good for, good for our projects, good for community built software, good for the world. So yeah, thank you. And I'm sure there are other folks in Fedora space we could have on your show as well to
Awesome.
talk more about some, their areas and what they do.
Well, if you ever want to have a free marketing budget for Fedora 39, feel free to come back on for that one or whatever you want to do.
Sounds good. I'll be here.
Awesome. Let people know where they can find you, anything you want to promote. The Fedora project, obviously.
Yeah. Fedora Spaces. I try to get the username MattDM most
Mhm.
places. I am no longer actively using Twitter. You can find me on Mastodon. Go to mattdm.org. That's the Matthew Miller. That is me of the websites. And yeah, of course, in Fedora Spaces,
Mhm.
chat.fedoraproject.org, discussion.fedoraproject.org. Matt DM
Your
there
website
as I
seems to list pretty much everything, doesn't it? Everything,
I
most things.
tried to there. This is a website that's made out of hand-built HTML
I love
since
it.
the 90s. So
Does the
there it
job.
is. Um,
Absolutely does the job. Anything upcoming that you specifically want to direct people to?
I,
Or?
I pitched it before, but I'll say it again. Devconf.cz. It's in the Czech Republic.
Mhm.
It's a lovely conference. It's normally in February, which is a terrible time to be in the middle of the Czech Republic in Brno. But
Yeah, that'd be
June
cold,
is
wouldn't it?
a
Yeah.
lovely time. It's a
Mhm.
beautiful little city, and I assume things will be streaming. They'll be recorded otherwise. There's a lot of fun talks, and my talk about 35 Fedora releases in 30 minutes goes kind of into history of the project
Mhm.
and lessons we've learned. And I've tried to make it be fun for people who want to know more about Fedora or who have been around and want to reminisce, but also for other projects who could maybe learn something from the mistakes we've made over those years,
Mhm.
as I talk very, very fast and will definitely lose my voice during that process.
Well, hopefully, it doesn't go too bad. Hopefully, you can
It,
still
it,
speak by the end of it.
yeah, I'll make sure I bring some honey tea with me to the
That's
podium.
definitely a good idea. Is that everything you want to mention?
I think that's the main thing. I'm sure there's something I'm forgetting, but let's put that as the highlight. And
Or if there's anything that you feel like you definitely need to mention, now just send me an email, message, or something. I'll just put it in the description or something like that.
sounds
Um,
good.
Sweet. As for me, the main channel is
Oh
Brody.
wait, I
Oh,
have one more
yes,
thing. Another
yes.
conference, Fedora conference. Flock to Fedora, right? We've got our own conference, right? And so this is a contributor-focused conference. It's not necessarily a user conference, but people are welcome to come if you're just interested. That's in Ireland at the beginning of August. It's flocktofedora.org is a brochure website for that. And the call for papers or proposals or whatever is currently open if you've got something interesting to say about Fedora or
Mhm,
to tell Fedora developers something that we ought to know, submit and
mhm,
come
mhm.
to it's in Cork, Ireland, and it's going to be a fun time. First in-person conference for a while. So yeah, I really should have put that like a big sticky note. Don't forget to pitch Flock as my thing. So I'm glad I remembered it in the last second here. Yeah, let's send people to that.
There's nothing else you want to mention.
Oh, I'm sure there's something else I want to
Okay.
mention,
Nothing
but this
else.
is
The,
nothing else in my
I'm
mind
not
at the
queuing
moment.
anything up right now as I'm doing this.
Oh, let's stop. It'll go on forever. That's calm. Time for calm.
Okay, well, as for me, Linux channel, Brody Robson, do videos there 6-ish days a week. I don't know what's gonna be out when this comes out because I'm like way ahead in my schedule. So this is gonna be out in like 2 or so weeks. It could be
All right.
anything. I don't know.
Well, then the call for papers may be closed by then, but check
Oh
and see.
yeah, that's a good point.
But it's going to be open, I think, till I don't know when it's open till. You check anyways, and you can. The conference, we have a nominal small fee for attendance, but you can. We want to make it affordable for everybody, so it's not expensive. Come and see us.
Awesome. I have my gaming channel where I do gaming stuff. I guess when this comes out, I'll be playing Final Fantasy 16. So pop on over for that if you want to see me play that. I'm also playing through Yakuza 0. Very good game. Highly recommend it. If you're listening to the audio version of this, you can find the video version on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. If you're watching the video version, you want to hear the audio, that'll be available on any podcast platform, RSS feed, chuck in your favorite app, you'll be able to find it.
Or you can close your eyes, I think. Right? Just, that also works.
That also, sure, you can do that, I guess. There are people who tell me they go to sleep watching my videos. Like, how do you do that? I don't understand. Like, I know they're trying to. Some of them are saying I'm boring, but like, if you hear my voice and you go to sleep, like, I don't know how you manage to deal with that noise in the back of your head as you're trying to sleep.
Yeah, I won't. I'm just gonna not touch that one. That's where we're gonna.
Oh,
sorry for interrupting your closing. I just couldn't help inserting.
Totally fair. I'll give you the final word. What do you want to say?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this to talk to all the people in the communities and supporting everything. It's really valuable, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate that you came on here and gave me your time for this. Awesome. I'll see you guys later then.